Hello, and welcome to our series on children's Bible storybooks. Today we are going to look at God With Us by Jeremy Pierre, illustrated by Cassandra Clark. I'll put a link in the description where you can look at or purchase the book, and if you missed my videos introducing the topic of Bible storybooks and want to know more about the rubric I'm working off of, you can start with this video or check the description for links. Of all the books I've come across that are categorized as Bible storybooks, this is least like a storybook. It's more like biblically themed free verse poetry with artistic images. If you were to pick a Bible storybook that could double as a coffee table book, this would be the one. This makes it distinctly different from the last two books we've looked at while still having some interesting similarities. I think it's worth a look. The story in the book is told by two angel observers reflecting on the work of God. I assume that narrator choice was loosely based on the phrase in 1 Peter 1:12 that suggests angels are curious about Christ's redemptive work. So the stories often have the form, hey, remember when this happened? What was God doing? It tends to assume the audience is already familiar with the story. Some aspects of the story are retold, but much more is a theological and devotional reflection on God's redemptive work, following the theme of God's presence with humanity. This, in a way, makes the book very similar to the last two books we looked at as well. Those also often lacked in story details and instead focused on theology and application. I do think the theology in this book is sturdier and less moralistic, more focused on what God is doing and less focused on teaching children to be good. This is refreshing, but still can be problematic. The author is coming at the story from a very specific view, fairly Baptist, maybe even Calvinist, which may make this book less appealing to a broader audience. Like the story is not really faithful to the biblical text, the illustrations are not really faithful to biblical imagery. That's not to say that either is inaccurate per se, just that their focus is not on literal accuracy. The text is focused on theology and devotion, and the illustrations seem to be pulling from various illuminations and images throughout the history of the church, rather than the context of the land. For example, we see the tradition of illuminated biblical manuscripts echoed in the first letter of each story, though it can make that first word a little harder to read. We can also see the artist reference previous artworks, like this image of Jacob wrestling with the angel. Architecturally, we also see the artist drawing on images from the Middle East and from church imagery from more modern times. I think all of this serves to make this book feel grounded in Christian tradition. The artist isn't necessarily trying to depict Calvary realistically, but in a way that is familiar to the Christian imagination. So while I think we need to recognize that lack of literal accuracy, we can also appreciate the artistry. If this book has one major flaw, it's the question of who it's intended for. As a picture book, it seems to be aimed at children, but the figurative language and the theological allusions in the text seem to make it more appropriate for maybe ages 12 and up. If anyone out there has used this for the 4 to 11 crowd, let me know how it's gone. In summary, if you are Baptist or roughly aligned with Baptist theology and you want a beautiful coffee table book that may also work as a children's book depending on how old and precocious your children are, this may work for you. Seriously though, as we come to the tier list, while there are some practical drawbacks to this book, I do think it has a lot of beauty. There were a few things in the text and pictures that bothered me, but nothing too major. For the most part, it wasn't things that were blatantly wrong, but just maybe from a different perspective than mine. This is one book I wouldn't mind adding to my collection, though practically I don't know how much I'd use it. So I think we'll put it in the A level on the tier list. Maybe if it told stories better, it would make it to the S, but it's hard to put it that high when I'm still questioning if it should actually be categorized as a Bible storybook. And I think we'll conclude with that summary. You can check the link in the description for a fully filled out rubric or ask questions in the comments if there's something I didn't address here. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you next time, and remember to pay attention to your context.